Hi there. Thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to go over how to shuck some oysters using the Outer Cape Kitchen Oyster Knife. For our setup, we'll be shucking on a cutting board, and we have a rag for some extra hand protection and a better grip. We have a total of 3 bowls. The first bowl holds our oysters. The second bowl contains ice. You want to keep the oysters chilled, but not submerged in any fresh water when that ice melts. Our third bowl we can discard shells into. And finally, we'll be serving on our oyster coasters that you can find on outercapekitchen.com. Before we dive into shucking, let's quickly touch on some key parts of the oyster and the Outer Cape Kitchen Oyster Knife. There's 2 main ways to shuck with our oyster knife. The first is through the hinge of the oyster using the hinge blade, and the second is going through the side of the oyster using the side shucking blade. If we take a look at our oyster, we'll see that it mimics this teardrop shape. At the point of the teardrop where it meets is the hinge of the oyster. This is where we can insert our hinge blade and get that first pop, so we have enough room to slide our blade along the top of the shell and cut that first muscle. The second way you can shuck an oyster is going through the side. Here you can see that the bottom shell is cupped, while the top shell is flat. Where the 2 shells meet is where you can insert the side shucking blade and also get that pop to shimmy your blade in and cut that muscle. Now, if we take a look at the inside of the oyster, we'll notice a few things. Oysters are bivalves, meaning they're a soft-bodied marine animal that has 2 shells that can open and close using their 2 muscles. The first muscle is connected to the top shell, and the second muscle is connected to the bottom shell. You can see the purple tint where it was once connected. To serve and eat an oyster, you need to cut both muscles so that the oyster is fully removed from the shell. When you're cutting the 2 muscles, you want to make sure you do so without bursting the oyster. When you cut the top muscle, take the primary scraping blade and you can run it across and along that top shell. Give it a few passes so it's fully cut, and you can remove that top shell. When you're cutting the bottom muscle on the bottom shell, you can use the secondary scraping blade. Now this is going to be a little more of a slide and scoop as we follow along the form of that bottom oyster shell. Now once you cut that bottom muscle, the oyster's fully severed from the 2 shells and it's ready to be served, ready to be eaten. So let's get into shucking. All right, now that we're set up, let's shuck some oysters. The first way we'll shuck is through the hinge of the oyster. Go ahead and take your oyster, place it on your rag, fold your rag over so it separates your hand from the oyster while still exposing the hinge here. We'll take our oyster knife, insert the hinge blade into the oyster. If you want to get it nice and snug, but if you feel like you don't have enough force, you can always throw your fingers over the back and give it an extra push. But I think we'll be okay here. We'll go ahead and insert that hinge blade, twisting it until it pops. There it is. We have our hinge inside the hinge of the oyster. Now the muscle is going to be up in this area. So we'll shimmy our blade along the top of the oyster shell, making sure not to burst the oyster, and give it a nice little scrape there. We can remove that top shell. And now this is where the second muscle is. Feel free to peel back the oyster low so you can get a better view. The muscle's right there. We'll take our secondary cutting blade. And we'll go ahead and just scrape along the bottom of the oyster. And we'll give it a flip so we know it's fully disconnected and it's ready to be served. Let's do it one more time. We'll take an oyster, put it on our rag, fold it over, insert the hinge, give it a little twist until we can feel pop. We can run our blade along the top of the shell till we feel it disconnect. We'll look for that second muscle, find it, scrape along the bottom of the shell, give it another flip. The second way we can shuck is through the side of the oyster using the side shucking blade. So, look at the side of the oyster. You can run your blade along the edges, kind of testing out different areas, feeling if there's any give. We'll start to insert it up at the top here. You can see we have it fully inserted. Now we know the muscle is up in this area here, so we can go ahead and just kind of give it a swipe. A few tires, just again scraping the top. Now this time the only difference, we'll just peel it back. You can always give it a little twist if it's stuck. Now same deal here. We'll go in and find that second muscle, give it a scrape. We can give it a little spin. And it's ready to serve. Do that one more time. Take your oyster, run your blade along the side, testing out a few different spots. Looks like we found one here. We'll go ahead and shimmy, make that cut, remove the shell, cut that bottom muscle, give it a flip. There we go. And this one I'm going to have. So that's how you shuck using the Outer Cape Kitchen Oyster Knife, going through the hinge of the oyster and the side of the oyster. I hope you guys enjoyed. Happy shucking.